Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis. We'll begin Kuf Beis Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the bottom. Continuing on with the discussion of being moisef and an oil arai, making an oil, making a roof, making a structure in malacha boina. If it's an oil arai, it's also midrabanan to be moisef, to add on to an existing structure, to add on to be moisef on an oil arai is mutter. A curtain you can hang and take down on Shabbos. It's not made to be there permanently, so it's mutter to put it up and to take it down. A canopy for chasanim, for a bridal bed, you can put it up and take it down on Shabbos. That's only where the roof, the horizontal part on top, is not a tefach. But if it has a tefach, then it's also. So if we envision it this way, there's a bed, it has a post on one end of the bed, there's a post on the other end of the bed, and there's a horizontal section on top. And then over this frame is draped a canopy. And they drape it down, and underneath it, so the area underneath is covered by this canopy, and it's sheltered. If this section is not a tefach, if it's less than a tefach, you're allowed to put up the canopy because it's not an oil. To be an oil, it has to be at least a tefach. So therefore, you can put the canopy over here. But if this is a tefach, then it's also. That's considered to be an oil. So, aval yesh begaga tefach is also v'chi ein begaga tefach, and even if there's no tefach, where we say it's muter lo yamim lo yisem el shein bepachas mishleisha samuch legag tefach. That's only that within 3 tefachim over here, there's not a tefach from here to here within three tefachim down. Within 3 tefachim down. Aval yesh bepachas mishleisha samuch legag tefach is also, but if within 3 of the top it does flare out to a tefach, there's a tefach across, it's also because it's lovud, it's considered to be that this is the roof, and therefore it's considered to have a gag of a tefach. So therefore it would be also, even if the very top is not a tefach, it still would be also. And even if it doesn't have a tefach within 3, it's also not muter ela shein, only if it doesn't have b'shipua tefach. If the slope doesn't have a tefach, aval yesh b'shipua tefach, but if it has a slope of a tefach, we'll define this in a minute, then shipua oil koilim domi, the slope of an oil is like an oil, and it's also. So even if it does not have a tefach on top, or even with 3 tefach, but if it flares down, so you have a tefach from here till here, or from here till here, then we don't view this part as being vertical, we view it as being horizontal, and we view this as being also a gag. It would be as a tefach of a gag. So it has to be also that you don't have a tefach from here to here, or from here to here. So otherwise, we would view it as shipu oil koilim. It can be considered to be an oil, even though it's sloped. It wouldn't be considered vertical. It would be considered to be horizontal and to be a gag of a tefach, and it would be also. So it comes out that you have to, the canopy, the kilos chasanim, has to be so narrow that it doesn't even have 3 tefachim from here to here. So Rashi points out that this is a very impractical bed. How would this work? How would it be used? He says that it must be that there's not only one of these structures, there's 2 or 3. There's 2 or 3 of these structures, and therefore you're able to use it underneath, but each one on its own is only a narrow canopy. And they have 2 or 3 narrow canopies on the bed, covering the bed. Other Rishonim learn that it's ornamental, that the kilos chasanim that we're discussing is something that's purely ornamental. It's not used for practical purposes, and that's why it's made in such a narrow way. He said a felt hat is mutter to wear on Shabbos. That even though it has a wide brim, it's not considered to be an oil, and it's mutter. Vatanya aser. We learn in the Brayas that it's aser. Like Kasha, hadis beitefach, and the less beitefach. It depends how wide the brim is. If the brim is a tefach wide, then it's aser. If it's less than a tefach, it's mutter. If you took a cloak or a talus and you extended it over your head and extended a tefach, you're going to tell me that also is an oil and that's also achanami da also? El Gemara says like kasha hada mahadik hada loy mahadik. Where is it also? Where is mutter? Where is the criteria? The criteria is if it's tied. I mean, it's a different consideration. If it's a soft hat and it's something that's light, and the wind can blow it away, we're afraid the wind will blow it away, come and pick it up and carry it from the Shusaram. So it has to be therefore tied. So if it's tied, it's mutter. If it's not tied, then it's also. So therefore, one can't wear a hat, lamaisa, that is not secure and that the wind can blow away. It's also to wear such a hat. It has to be secured and tied. The Shulchan Aruch brings down 2 days. Do we even have a consideration for a wide brim hat? There's one day that says that the only consideration is if it's going to be blown away or not blown away, and a wide brim hat is not considered to be an oil. The other day holds a no. It is considered to be an oil, but if it's a soft brim, it's not an oil. But if it's stiff and it protrudes a tefach, then whether it's tied or not, there's a separate issue. That in itself, there's an extension of a tefach on a stiff brim, that would be considered to be an oil, and that would be aser. So it's 2 days brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. Continuing on with the discussion about putting in doors. Zok the Mishnah, Machzirin, Tzir, Hatachtan, B'mikdash. The discussion the Mishnah is talking about in Kalim, not in a door to a house, but in Kalim. And typically the Kalim had a door. So if you had a crate, if you had a closet, it had a door. It's a movable item. And it's a chest, it had a door, and it had a pivot on top and on the bottom. Now, as Rashi explains, that if the top one is attached, you can easily insert the bottom one into its place. But if the top one is out of place, even if the bottom is, it'll fall over. It'll easily fall over. So that's one background information. The second, as we discussed many times before, that Ein Shvus B'Mikdash, for the purpose of the Avodah Mikdash, the Rabbanan waived Isuri the Rabbanan. Generally speaking, the waived Isuri the Rabbanan. So therefore, if you have a container that is needed for the Avodah Mikdash, let's say it has salt in it, and then the question is, if the door became out of place, can you adjust it? So the Mishnah says, Machzir and Tzira Tachtim B'Mikdash, you can reinsert the bottom pivot in the Kli, in this container, in the Beis HaMikdash, Avaloi B'Medina, but not in the Medina, not outside. So the way Rashi explains it is, this Tana holds is that Yesh Binyan B'Kelim, even though we're talking about a Kli over here, but the Halacha of Binyan would apply. However, if the top pivot is in place, as we said before, it's putting in the bottom one, since it would still, the door still stays in place, it's not considered Baina Midoraisa. In the Medina, it's also or geyser, because a person might put it in, if he now puts in the bottom one, he might put it and fasten it securely, which would be a Doraisa. So they're geyser. But in the Beis HaMikdash, Ein Shvus B'Mikdash, so therefore it's muter. So therefore, so this is going according to the Tana Kama, but he says, but the top one, since, as we mentioned, if the top one is out of place, even if the bottom one is in place, it will fall over. Reinserting the top one is considered baina, so it's also not only in Medina, it's also in the Mikdash as well. This is going according to the Shita Tana Kama that Yesh Binyan B'Kelim. But Rabbi Yehuda Mary says Ha'elyon B'Mikdash, the top one could be put in, even the top one could be put in the Mikdash, because Ein Binyan B'Kelim. there's no boin bekim. So the whole Isser is Rabbanan. So therefore, even the top one is only an Isser Rabbanan, and then Shus B'mikdash, so it's mutter. V'hatachton b'Medina, and the tachton can even be put in within the Medina. Ton Rabbanan, Sir Del Shira Teva Migdal, the pivot of the door of a carriage or crate or closet, b'mikdash machzirin, b'medina dayachim. In the mikdash, even if it's out of the socket, you can reinsert it. But in the Medina, you can't reinsert it, but just if it's loose, you're allowed to, it's starting to slip out, you can put it back into place. But the top one, you can't put both in the mikdash and the Medina also, because Xera Shema Yiska, we're afraid that he'll put it securely into place, he'll knock it securely into place. And he does, he's Chayv Chatas. Shall bor v'shall dos v'shall yitzia, if it's a pivot, not of a container kli, but if it's shall bor, if it's to a pit, or v'shall dos, a cistern, or yitzia, an annex, and it came out of its place, lo yachzir, he cannot even reinsert it. And if you did it's chayv because since these are part of the ground and b'chubel karka, even just putting it back into place, not even if it's not completely removed, just even if it started to slip out of place and to reinsert it, that's also considered to be boina because these things are part of the karka, the b'chubel karka. Next mission is dealing with a different topic. And that is the topic of the gzera, or the possible isser that would be involved if a person has a wound and there's a bandage with a dressing, and to put it on or to put it back on. Now, there's one issue over here of refuah, anything that's medicinal. There's a gzera, shchikol samamonim, that you can't do anything that is medicinal on Shabbos. That's also midrabanan. It's not the primary discussion of the Mishnah. The primary discussion is that something to smoothen out a surface, if it's something that you're smoothing out a surface, genuinely smoothing it out, it's malacha of mamachek. It's a malacha deraisa. The question is the bandage with the dressing, are we concerned, where are we geyser that he might come to smoothen out and be over that malacha? So the Mishnah is the Mishnah machzir rativ mikdash. If there is a ratiyah, a bandage, and with a dressing on it. Now, if the kohen had a wound, he removed the bandage in order to do the avodah, so that it shouldn't be a chatzitza. The kohen is not allowed to have a chatzitza between his hand and the avodah. So, if he had the bandage, he removed it in order to do the avodah, so it wouldn't be a chatzitza. Machzirin, you're allowed to put it back on Shabbos. Now, as far as the gzera of refuah of shchikol samamonim, Taisus points out there's no problem over here because you're not putting it to begin with. It was there from beforehand. So that gzera doesn't apply. But however, normally we would be geyser about putting back on a bandage because if it has a dressing, you might come to be machik. But over here, machzir ratiyah b'mikdash, you're allowed to put it back on the mikdash, because these are one of the things that we say, if we didn't allow you to put it back on, you might not take it off and might do the avodah with the chatzitza, so they're matrid. But in the Medina, outside the base of Mikdash, it's also because of the gzera of mamachik. The imbetchila kan v'kan also. But if he's putting on it for the first time, then it would be also in both places. It would be also. It would be also because we would be geyser. We only allowed even in the base of Mikdash if it was there already, but not to put it on to begin with. Tan Rabbanan sagt die Gemara Ratiyah shepesh mal gabi machzor machzir b'Shabbos. If the bandage fell off the wound, you can replace it on Shabbos. You can put it back on. You can put it on even in the Medina. Why can you put it on? Because falling off is, we say, is this Tana holds that that's something that's not so shchiach, and we're not concerned for that. So he says that you can put it back on. Rav Yehuda says no, you can't. He says huchlaka lamata, if it slipped down lamala, you could push it back up. Lamala lamata, if it slid up, you can push it back down. But if it came completely off, you cannot put it back on. Umegala mixes ratia, and you can uncover part of the bandage, and bekanach piyamaka, and you can wipe off the wound, the opening of the wound. V'chayzer megalal mixes ratia, and then you can expose the other part of it. So you do part of it at a time. You can't remove the bandage. You can expose part of the wound and clean it off, and then put the bandage back, and then uncover the other part of it. V'chayzer megalal mixes ratia, and expose the other part of the dressing, and wipe the surface of the wound. And however, but you can't wipe the dressing itself, because that's marech, that's smoothing out the dressing. And over there, if he does that, that's chayv katas, that's smoothing out the surface. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda, the Amayra said in the name of Shmuel, halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like the Tana of Rabbi Yehuda that says that if it came completely off, you cannot put it back on. Amar Rav Chisda Leishon El Shapir Shal Gabe Kli. So with this, what we're saying, the Tana Kama. Now we're going back on the Tana Kama. That the Tana Kama said that if it fell off, you could put it back. Even if it fell off, you couldn't put it back. That's only if it fell on a cleat, like a pillow. Aval Pirsha al Gabe Karka, but it fell onto the floor, Divra Kol Aser. Everyone would agree that it's Aser to do that. Even the Tanakama would agree that it's Aser. Mar Ravashi said, Havakim the Kame Abba, I was standing upon my father, meaning Ravashi. Nafla le Abe Saja, he had a dressing and it fell onto a pillow. V'kamahadale, and he put it back. Aminulay said, don't you hold of Rav Chisda said that machlekes shapir shel gabe kli. The machlekes in the Bryce is only when it fell onto a kli, onto a pillow, or on a mattress. Aval pir shel gabe karka also, but if it fell onto the karka, then it's awesome. Everyone agrees that it's awesome. Meaning, and therefore, even on a pillow, it's a machlekes, and v'amar Shmuel halach Rabbi Yehuda. The halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore on a pillow it would be also. Amar li lo yishmili. He said, I did not hear it. Klamer lo yisvili, meaning I don't agree with it. Meaning Ravashi held that the machlekes was when it fell onto the ground, but if it fell onto a pillow, then everyone would be hold its mutter. Even Rabbi Yehuda would hold that it's mutter. So even though the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, but he only answers on the ground, not on a pillow. Continuing on with different gzeres that are apply in the Medina and not in the Beis HaMikdash. Zok the Mishnah, Kaishim Nima B'Mikdash. If on the musical instrument, the Levium had the shir that was part of the Avodah, when they put in Sachim, the Levium had the shir and they had musical instruments. So that was necessary to do the Avodah with these musical instruments. If the nima of one of the strings of the instruments broke, and they needed to repair it for the avodah, kaishim nima b'mikdash, you can tie it on Shabbos. Now, even though kaisher is a malachim, nevertheless it was mutter over here. As we'll see in the Gemara, we're going to look for the Mandamer who holds that even machshirei mitzvah, this is not the mitzvah itself, it's only a machshir for the mitzvah, tying the string in order for the Levium to do the shira with the instrument. It's a machshir, and it's a machshir that it could not have been done before Shabbos because it broke on Shabbos. It's machshir mitzvah. It's machshir mitzvah that you could not have done before Shabbos. It's doicha Shabbos. So, therefore, in the Beis HaMikdash is l'tzarech avodah kaishim nima, avaloi b'Medina, because tying is a malacha, and in the Medina it's not l'tzarech mitzvah, so therefore it's also. Ve'im b'tchila kan v'kan aser. But if it's to begin with, meaning if you could have tied it before Shabbos, if it's just to do it to begin with, then it's also even the Beis HaMikdash. So as we said, this Tana is holding that machshir mitzvah are deicha Shabbos, but only machshirim she'ef shel ha'soisam mi'baydiyan. It's only if it's ef shel ha'soisam mi'be'erev Shabbos. V'riminu, for the Gemara, we have a stirum. The Brisa says, Nimaz kina shenitzaka, if you have a string of a harp that broke, lo ya kaisha lo einva, you didn't make a kesher, you only made a bow. an aniva, but not a kesher. Kesher is also our Mishnah is mater a kesher. For the more like kesher, it's not a kesher. How Rabbanan and how Rabbi Eliezer. It's machlokes Rabbanan and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, the Amar Machshirim Mitzvah the Shabbos, he holds that even Machshirim the Shabbos, therefore, Kaisha, you can tie it. Our Mishnah holds like Rabbi Eliezer, therefore you can do the Kshira, even though it's a Malacha, it's Deichas Shabbos. The Rabbanan, Damre Ein Deichin, but the Rabbanan say no, Machshirim Mitzvah not Deichin, and therefore the Braisa holds like the Rabbanan, and therefore Einva, you can only make the Aniva, but not the Kshira. Break the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer, if you're saying our mission is Rabbi Eliezer, I feel like Nami. Rabbi Eliezer holds that Machshirim, even if you could have done them before Shabbos, it's also Deichas Shabbos. And our mission says clearly, also. How can that be the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer? Ella, the Gemara says, like Kasha, how Rabbi Yehuda, how Rabbanan. This depends, it's totally on the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan. Rabbanan hold that the Malacha is Kshira, is tying. And aniva, a bow, is not awesome. And Rabbi Yehuda says there's no chilik. There's no chilik between a kshira and aniva. Therefore, the brisa that makes a chilik between the two has to be the Rabbanan. The Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Correcting more of Rabbi Yehuda, leave it a man. Well, Rabbi Yehuda, but who is he going to as far as the machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan, as far as Machshirim go? Who does he hold like? Rabbi Eliezer. If he holds, like we said before, it should be motiv and yes, he's not machalik. The Mishnah is not machalik in Kshira and Aniva, but if it's going according to Rabbi Eliezer, it should be motiv l'chadchila. And if it's going according to Rabbanan, it's also even b'di'evet. Ella, the Gemara says, like Kasha, how Rabbi Shimon, how Rabbanan. It's totally on the machlokes Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan, decided as follows. We learn in the Brisa ben Levi shenifskula nima bechinar, a Levi that the string of the harp broke. Kaisha, the Tanakama says you can tie it, and Rabbi Shimon Aimer Einva, he says no, you can only make an aniva, a bow. And Rav Shimon Elazar Aimer Afi Ena Mashmas as a kol. He says if you tie it or you make a bow, it's going to impair the sound. The sound won't be the same anymore. So therefore, Ella, rather what you should do is, now this is a Zaytik in both cases, whether you make the Kshira, it's a Malacha, whether you do with the following Eitzah, it's also a Malacha, as we'll see, it's Makeh B'Patish, but he says in terms of the quality of the sound, this is a better Eitzah. Ella Mishal Shel Mamata V'Karach Melmala. Mishal Shel Melmala V'Karach Melmata. The strings of the harp, so there's a peg, like we would have nowadays in a musical instrument, in a guitar, etc. There's a peg, there's a string, and there's another peg. You wind it around, you stretch the string and wind it around the top peg. So he says if it broke, rather than tie it, or what you do is you just extend, don't tie it, extend the rope, extend the string rather, and unwind some of it, extend it, and wind it on top. Or unwind some of the top one and extend it to the bottom and wind it. And therefore, you don't have the knot or the bow, which impairs the sound. Now, it's going to be a malacha anyway. It's Makeh B'Patish. So there's no difference in terms of the malacha and Shabbos, whether it's Kaish or Makeh B'Patish. But he says in terms of the Shira, this is the better Eitzah. But he holds also essentially that it's mut. So therefore, it's as follows. Therefore, we see the Mishnah holds like the Rabbanan, and the Brisa, which makes a chilik between a bow and a kesher, is the sheet of Rav Shimon. The Rabbanan say it says ben levi shenifskleini b'kina kaish. You can tie it. Meaning, so this, and we found a sheet that holds, not like Rabbi Eliezer and not like the Rabbanan who argue Rabbi Eliezer, a different sheet that holds than Machshir and Mitzvah Deichas Shabbos, but not if you could have done it by Yom. So if it ripped, it snapped on Shabbos, you can tie it, but not Mibad Yom. So that's consistent with the Mishnah. The chilik between a Kshira and a Niva, we see that's the sheet of Rav Shimon who says, no, we only allow a bow, but we don't allow you to do a kesher. The boy same, and perhaps he'll tell you how Rabbanan. That really both the Mishnah and the first brisa that we mentioned are going according to the Rabbanan. That only Machshirin that you could not have done Mibad Yom, that's Deichas Shabbos. V'loi kasha kan be'emsa kan min hatzad. There's a chilik between the middle and on the side. If it's ripped, the tears in the middle, then a niva will not properly repair it. A bow will not properly repair it, and therefore we allow you to do a kesher. So the Mishnah that says your kesher is talking where it's snapped in the middle. But if it's min hatzad, you don't have to fortify it that well, and it's sufficient to do a bow, a niva. So over there, only a niva is allowed, and the Brisa is talking in such a case. It's talking in both cases as be'emsa. So how do we explain it? Marsavar gazrina. So how do we explain it? We explain that the Mishnah is going according to the Rabbanan. Therefore, if it's be'emsa, we allow kshira. But the Brisa, the first Brisa, is going according to this latter opinion of Rav Shimon that we brought down. Rav Shimon, who says in any event we only allow a aniva, we only allow to do a bow, and therefore he says that even if it is be'emsa, it's only a bow. Marsa or gazrinan. So essentially, Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan are in agreement. But Rav Shimon, Marsa or gazrinan, we're geyser that if we allow you to do a regular knot in the middle, you might do it even if it's broken at the end. And at the end, we wouldn't allow it because there's no need to do a kesher over there. So we're geyser, umar samar loy gazrin, and the Rabbanan say we're not geyser. If it snapped in the middle, we will allow you to do a kesher. At the end, we won't. But we're not geyser if it snapped in the middle that you might come to do a knot in the end instead of a niva. So this is one of the rare cases that we see that even though the general rule is that ain't shus b'mikdash, but that here, according to Rav Shimon, we are geyser a shus b'mikdash. Sometimes we are geyser shus b'mikdash.